Hey guys, I was giving a presentation the other day on strategies on how not to run out of money in retirement, and somebody in the audience asked me a question that kind of broke my heart. And anytime I receive a question from a real life client, I'd like to share it with you guys because if one person has the question, then other people probably have the question too. So the person out in the audience raised their hand and we were talking about interest rates, and he said, "Boy, I remember when we used to be able to make a lot of interest. We remember the good old days back in the 1970s when we could make over 10% on our savings account." And he said, "Yeah, and nowadays, I'm only making zero point 0.1 of a percent." And he said, "Is there any way we could make more than that?" And it kind of broke my heart because nobody should be making zero point 0.1 of 1%. A few years ago, that was the best that you could get, but rates have gone up since then. So I asked him what his money was in, and he said, "Well, it's in a savings account." And I don't want to mention the name of the bank here, but it was one of the largest banks in the United States, and everybody would know it if I said it. And he said, "That's the rate that they're paying." And he mentioned that he had been with the bank for over 20 years and he didn't want to move his money. And you could tell that he just assumed that he was a loyal customer of the bank and they were going to provide him with a competitive rate. So I actually looked up the specific bank and what account he had his money in, and he was actually incorrect when he said they're paying zero point 0.1 of 1%. They're actually only paying 0.01 of 1%. What this means is that, let's say he had $100,000 in his savings account for retirement, he would only be making $10 of interest per year. In today's environment, you should be making at least 4% on your savings. I think a lot of seniors feel loyalty to their financial institutions because they've been with them for so long. But really quickly, let me explain how a bank works. They pay you an interest rate on your deposits, and then they go ahead and lend that money out at a higher rate, and then they keep the difference. So the less interest they can pay you, then the more profit they make. So if they were paying this gentleman 0.01 of 1% on his savings, then they're taking that and they're lending it out to somebody on a mortgage and say maybe charging them 7%. Okay? If they were paying this gentleman more than 0.01%, then it just eats into their profit. So the bank wants to pay you as little as possible. And in this case, they're basically just completely ripping this guy off. So in this particular situation, if this gentleman had $100,000 in his savings account and he was making 0.01 of 1%, he would only be making $10 of interest per year, and that's before taxes. So that hasn't even been taxed. So he's making less than $10 per year. In today's environment, all of my clients are making at least 4% on their savings. So if this person had $100,000 in an account with me, he'd be making $4,000 per year in interest. Okay, think of the difference. Now imagine it wasn't $100,000 of savings. Let's raise the number. Let's say it was $300,000 of savings. That would be $12,000 a year of interest. Okay, so he would be making, in that case, $30 at his financial institution he's currently at, or $12,000. This is just free money that he's losing out on every single year because he trusts his bank. He trusts that his bank is giving him a competitive rate. I've actually seen this situation quite a bit lately. So the moral of the story is either do the research on your own and find a competitive rate for your savings, which should be around 4% currently, or find a professional that works with rates like this every single day. This is actually something that I help clients with all the time. So if you have any questions, please reach out via the link below or give me a call. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.